This week's Torah portion is called Tazria. In the beginning of time, when God created the world, we understand that God created the world with language, with speech, that God spoke the world into existence. 10 utterances of God bring about the creation of the world. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and so on. Through speech, God creates. We, mankind, people, are created in the image of God. And one of the ways that we understand that is we also are gifted with a capacity to speak. And through our speech, we can build, we can be positive, we can create. Just like God did when God created the world through speech, so too we can build the world through speech. We are a being unlike any other being in the world that has that capacity. But we also have the capacity to use our speech for negativity and for destruction and for destroying other people. And so we are caught with that free will somewhere in between what our thoughts are and how those thoughts manifest in our speech. We can choose how we use our speech. So this week's Torah portion, we read about a spiritual malaise that represents it as something physical. If a person speaks negatively of another person, they are afflicted with a physical manifestation of that spiritual malaise. They'll be afflicted with a disease, with a skin condition called psoriasis, and it would manifest on their skin. It would manifest on the stones of their houses, and it would manifest on their clothing. If it was on the skin, they would have patches that were called negas. They would have a patch of the tzra'as that was called a nega. So the word nega is spelt with 3 Hebrew letters. It's spelt with a nun, and with a gimel, and with an ayin. And nega has the ayin at the end. If you rearrange the Hebrew letters, and you put the ayin at the front, you end up with the word oneg. And oneg means delight, means pleasurable, means joy. So the difference between a nega, which is a negative something physical that comes from a negative action, negative speech, a nega, the opposite of that, or related to that, is the oneg, is pleasure. And it's dependent on where the ayin is positioned. And ayin is our eyes. How do we see with our eyes? What do we see with our eyes? Do we see good? Are our thoughts good? Are they manifested with good speech? And if they are, we end up with oneg, which is pleasure. And if we have the ayin at the end of the word, which represents negativity and an eye that doesn't see good in other people, then we end up with bad speech. We end up with speech that's hurtful and harmful and destructive, and we end up with nega. So God gave a sign to people at that time, in the time of the Mishkan, the time of the tabernacle, in the desert, and the time of the temple, where people, if they acted in this way, would have this sign come to them so that they knew to fix themselves. And a person with this tzra'as would have to be ostracized. He would sit outside the camp. And the idea is that when we speak ill of other people, that we destroy other people, and it leads to those people being socially ostracized. And therefore, measure for measure, in Jewish terms, that's called mida keneged mida. Measure for measure. If you cause somebody to be ostracized, then you could learn that. You need to learn that lesson by being ostracized. And the person who is afflicted with psoriasis would have to sit outside the town and declare himself tameh, which means that he's blocked. He's blocking God from shining God's light onto us. There's a blockage. It's a tameh. He becomes tameh. He declares himself tameh, blocked, ritually impure. And he has to go and fix his ways, and then he can be brought back into, if he fixes his ways properly, he can come back and be part of the community again. And what's very interesting is the words for tzara'as, for this condition that a person was afflicted with. If you rearrange those letters, they become the word atzeret, which means to assemble. So at the same time we use our speech to destroy, we're afflicted with a nega. And if we use our speech to build, it leads to oneg, depending on how our eye sees another person and how we take our speech and we use it. But also that tzara'as rearranged becomes assembly, and the point and the goal of our interactions with each other is to assemble ourselves, to be united, to be one people, to be a people who are unified and building each other up. And it's hard, and it's a struggle, and we don't in our days have an immediate sign that we have done something wrong and now fix your ways. So we're doing a lot of things we don't even know we're doing. And it's very hard to be really on top of everything you say to everybody about everybody, but really to learn the laws of how to speak and how to build others through our language is super important, and it's something that comes out from this week's Torah portion. So I want to give an analogy, a story that's given about a peddler. And this peddler's coming to a town, and in the town there's someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't like the peddler, and he goes around and he speaks ill of the peddler, and he tells people, don't buy from this person, he's not a good person, whatever he says, he goes around. And before the peddler even comes to town, the town is against him. He arrives in the town with his wares, and he's looking to sell his wares, and nobody's buying from him because they have a preconceived idea of who this person is from the gossip that was said about him, and nobody is buying from him. So the peddler goes to the rabbi and he says to the rabbi, I don't know what's going on in this town. I need to sell my wares. I have a family and I'm struggling here. My business is being destroyed. Help me. And the rabbi says, I have an idea. And he goes to the man who was the gossip mongering, and he says to the gossip monger, did you speak ill of the peddler? And the gossip monger admits that he did. And he says to him, go home and get a pillow, a feather pillow, and bring me your feather pillow. So the man goes home, he gets the pillow, he brings it back to the rabbi, and the rabbi opens the window, and it's a very windy day outside, and he opens up the pillow, and all the feathers fly out of the pillow, and they swirl around the room, and they go out the window, and they lodge in the trees and the bushes, and they fly up into the sky, and they're carried away. And the rabbi says to the man, now, go and pick up all those feathers. And the man says, there's no way I can pick up all those feathers, they're scattered all over. And he said, that's the power of your words. Your words are like the feathers in the pillow. You scatter them, and they're gone. You can't retrieve them. When you've said something, you've hurt people, and it's really hard to make it back, bring it back, and to redeem yourself. So be careful before we use our language. I think the message is that how we use our language. The last point I want to bring out is this state of being someone who is afflicted with tzaraas, for evil speech. And we have the nega on our bodies or on our houses or on our clothing as an indicator of how we are supposed to speak. We have the idea of going outside the town to contemplate what it means, what we've done to other people, to understand how we've ostracized. But on some level, say our commentators, that when we speak ill of other people, we have destroyed ourselves. We've blocked ourselves. We've used our God-given, God-like capacity to build, to speak well, to see well. We've used that negatively and wrongly. And it's interesting, the word nega is in the word negativity, that through our negativity we are afflicted with this tzaraas that manifests as these negas on our bodies and our houses and our clothing. So the negativity that we exhibit in the world, what that does is it blocks us from having a relationship with God, which is what we're aiming for. So let's use our speech well. Let's use the breath that God gives us well. Let's use the soul that's inside of us, that's shining out through our eyes, that manifests itself through our thoughts and through our speech. Let's try to line it up so that we create oneg, we create joy, and we create pleasure, and we create atzeres, which is assembly. That's the goal. And the antithesis of that is a nega, which is the opposite of oneg, a nega, which is the affliction, the tzaraas, which is the skin condition, the spiritual, the physical manifestation of our doing something wrong. We end up with tzaraas, and we end up being blocked from God. So again, the goal is joy, pleasure, assembly, using our speech well, bringing people together, and being in line with receiving the light and the divine blessing.